on the move. The virus has arrived in yet another province.
They're concerned about any health problem that's on the mainland. It's not going to stay there.
Showing the vaccine only thought to be 10% effective.
Nationwide, there are already more than 41,000 cases confirmed. Every state in the country reporting widespread flu activity.
As of this morning, 18 countries around the world have reported cases of the flu within their borders.
Numbers out of Australia as of mid-October are concerning. If you get sick, stay home.
American Icon by Bryce G. Hoffman. I actually recently bought this book on sale. I think I got it for like $6 on Audible. I'm not really much of a car guy, but I do own Ford stock. I had bought some a while back, and since I came across the book, I figured, hey, why not check it out? Before listening to the book, I did know about Ford's problems, and I did know that they didn't take a bailout from Congress like General Motors did and Chrysler did. But other than that, I didn't know much about the company's history. And when I say I didn't know much about the company's history, I mean more than the obvious, with the Henry Ford lore and everything that goes along with it. Beyond that, I knew that Ford made great trucks and kind of crappy cars. I do, however, remember all the turmoil in the news when they were begging for cash in front of Congress, and I do remember being surprised when the government kind of bailed them all out, even though they had been making bad decisions for decades. So after finishing this book, I can say it's a good book, but it's an aggravating book. Unless the author totally embellished, it makes all the CEOs or all the executives, it makes them all sound like a bunch of children, just a bunch of idiots running this massive car company. I think in one quarter they lost $5 billion. At one point they were losing about $90 million a day. One guy, through all this, was flying back home to his house in Florida every weekend on a corporate jet paid for by Ford, all while they're losing money. Lots and lots of money. So my question is, at what point were they going to develop a sense of urgency? And it appears the answer to that question is never, until Alan Mulally came along. And he had already gone through, obviously, the famous story of him saving Boeing. Boeing was circling the drain, and he went in there and basically fired all the dead weight and somehow turned that company around. And then after that, somehow got roped into dealing with Ford's problems. Hiring him was probably one of the best decisions the Ford family had made after a long history of bad decisions. As Alan Mulally put it after looking at their books, the company had been going out of business for 30 years, just constantly kicking the debt down the road and letting someone else worry about it. So finally, when he gets in, he sits everyone down, calls everyone into work, and they all kind of kicked and screamed that they had to come into this meeting and ask if there's any problems that anyone knows about, problems with products, or anything else. Nobody wanted to speak up. So according to all the executives, business is great, but somehow they're losing billions of dollars every quarter. According to Mulally, the first problem was obvious. His management was either afraid to speak up or all basically just a bunch of morons. And after listening to the book, it's hard to tell where his decisions that led to saving the company stopped and where basically just dumb luck came into play. They were able to secure a huge loan and leverage all their assets, including the brand itself, which was pretty gutsy, in order to get funding to get them through any crisis and to restructure. Just before the credit crunch, just before the economy took a crap, which ultimately gave them barely enough to restructure. I remember these guys, seeing them on the news, just get throttled by Congress about all taking separate corporate jets to DC to ask for a government bailout. And so after the initial meeting, Mulally hated it so much, he went back to his war room and was basically asked his guys, is there any way that we can survive this whole crisis without taking a bailout? And immediately, the marketing guy, who, by the way, at the time was Jim Farley, and yeah, he was related to Chris Farley, which, by the way, he also looks just like Chris Farley, apparently is nothing like Chris Farley, but he was a marketing super genius, was like, there is a lot of value, marketing value, in not taking the bailout money, which, as it turns out, is exactly what they ended up doing. And I think the only other company that didn't take bailout money was Tesla. All the other companies, car companies, well, I should say Chrysler and General Motors, got a big fat check from the taxpayers, which also ended up being a thorn on their side because Congress then could dictate certain things they could and couldn't do as a business. Now, I personally think that they shouldn't have got a bailout, any other company except for huge banks at the time were going out of business left and right. And I understand they're huge, but that's one of the reasons why some of the analysts and other books on economics said that the recession wasn't as deep as it should have been. These corrections weren't allowed to take place. Companies like GM, who were making horrible business decisions, were allowed to come through. And as a result, they didn't learn their lesson. So they're still making meathead moves, and it's business as usual. Whereas Ford had to restructure, and streamline, and adapt, and actually build vehicles that the public wanted. Imagine that. But it wasn't done easily. The company was circling the drain, and they had no other choice but to make drastic changes, restructure, sell different brands like Mercury and Jaguar just to pay the bills. And on top of all that, they had to renegotiate with the union. And the union, of course, doesn't like to make cuts either. It seemed like the whole book is nothing but an uphill battle just to keep the company going. The book also outlines Ford's previous history, and they basically go through a cycle of having success and then getting laxed in their decision making. Oh, we got a crisis, we got to regroup and reorganize. Then they have success and so on and so forth. So now Ford, after I think the stock went down to like 2 something at the low point, and then it got all the way up to $16. Now it's hovering around $9.50 as of the time of this recording. And it's been kind of bouncing around. Now they're dealing with tariffs, so there's some uncertainty going on there, and they're also going through restructuring now. Now the difference between the restructuring now and the previous one is that they're doing this one with money in the bank and not when they're out of money and basically the economy's got a gun to their head. So I think they learned their lesson, but only time will tell. One thing to keep in mind is that they did have to suspend their dividend throughout this whole crisis. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But hey, what do I know? Let me know what you guys think of the book in the comments below, and I'll talk to you next time.